You canceled your own daughter's wedding? The question wasn't whispered. It was hurled. Elaine didn't blink. She sipped her coffee, calm as a judge. I paid for it. I can end it. Inside the ballroom, Madison, her only child, was screaming into a dead phone. And for the first time in 32 years, Elaine wasn't going to answer. All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor. Subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. The chandeliers glistened like glass tears, strung high over velvet chairs and ivory tablecloths. Light bounced off crystal centerpieces, soft jazz hummed from hidden speakers, and the air smelled faintly of eucalyptus and champagne. The whole scene shimmered with curated joy, except the bride. Madison stood stiffly near the stage, arms crossed, lips tight. Her satin train pooled behind her like it was trying to run away. She wasn't smiling, not at the rehearsal dinner's final toast, not when the planner complimented the floral arch, not even when her fiancé kissed her on the cheek. I lingered in the back of the ballroom, unseen but present, watching. I had spent the last year stitching this day together, from flower trials to linen samples, cake tastings to calligraphed menus. When her father died, I promised I'd make her dreams come true, even if it meant rewriting mine. And yet, here I was, standing in a new gown, hands clasped over my stomach, hoping the daughter I raised would look my way with something softer than indifference. When there was a lull in the chatter, I walked toward her, weaving between bridesmaids and groomsmen holding cocktails and half-finished sentences. "You look beautiful, sweetheart," I said, my voice catching slightly. "I'm proud of you." She turned. Her eyes swept from my face to the dress I wore. Navy silk, high neckline, a brooch from her grandmother near my collarbone. Her expression hardened. "Don't wear that," she snapped. "You'll ruin the photos." Time didn't freeze. It fractured. Shards of air, noise, pride, and something much older splintered inside me. A few of her bridesmaids exchanged glances, suddenly fascinated by the texture of their bouquets. Someone coughed. Somewhere, a violinist trailed off mid-scale. I didn't speak. I couldn't. The weight of that sentence pressed against my ribs like a bench press from a ghost. She'd said it without hesitation, not in jest, not even as a whispered aside. It was direct, sharp, surgical, like I was clutter, like I didn't belong in the image she was building. I stepped back, smiled faintly as though I'd misheard, and excused myself. My heels clicked softly on the ballroom floor. No one stopped me. No one followed. Out in the lobby, the lighting was dimmer, more forgiving. I reached the front doors and felt the warm Georgia evening hit my face like a question I hadn't prepared for. Outside, the Spanish moss hung like curtains from the oaks, swaying gently in the humid breeze. I stood there a long moment, listening to my own breath. I could taste the salt in the air, Savannah's way of reminding you it had tides too, and that they pulled in both directions. My phone buzzed in my clutch. "Janine. You okay? Where'd you go?" I didn't respond. Instead, I walked down the stone steps, past a valet who nodded politely, and sat at the edge of the fountain where couples often posed for photos. The laughter inside was muffled now, distant. My hands shook as I opened my purse. The rehearsal program was still tucked beside my lipstick. At the bottom, under a restaurant receipt and a lavender sachet, was a folded copy of the contract. The venue, the food, the vendors. My name on every page, every cost routed through me. My heart wasn't pounding from age, it was fury, slow and clean, like water coming to boil. And beneath it, grief. The kind that comes not from losing someone, but from realizing they never really saw you to begin with. I scrolled through my contacts and tapped a name I hadn't used in months. A male voice picked up after the second ring. "Elaine? Everything all right?" I looked back up at the windows above. I could just see the silhouette of Madison laughing, holding a champagne glass, not looking for me. "How fast?" I said. "Can a contract be reversed?" Inside the rehearsal dinner, laughter clinked against wine glasses and cutlery. A jazz trio played near the bar, and the seating chart I helped organize sat proudly on its easel by the door. My name printed on a little white card I would never touch. Madison moved through the room like a glossy magazine bride, her smile polished but hollow. I watched from across the street, sitting on a bench beside the riverwalk, cloaked by the soft shadows of hanging moss. Her laugh, too bright, too wide, echoed faintly through the open doors. She hadn't even sent a text. It reminded me of the night her father died. Madison had only been 12. I was the one who told her he wouldn't be coming home from the hospital. I remember the way her tiny hand curled into mine, like if she held tight enough I wouldn't vanish too. But over the years I did. Bit by bit, I blurred myself out in the background of her recitals, her college tours, her promotions. I paid for the cello lessons, the business classes, the apartment when she couldn't afford rent, and I did it all quietly, because that's what mothers do when love is louder than pride. I pulled out a napkin from my purse and began scribbling numbers. $4,000, venue deposit, $3,200, custom dress, $1,500, catering retainer, $680, monogrammed invitations, $240, bridesmaid robes, $300, travel expenses for her father's side of the family. The list grew. So did the ache behind my ribs. My phone buzzed. Janine, you left? Is everything okay? Sasha, I saw her snap at you. Want me to bring you dessert? Marcy, honestly, you deserve better. I stared at the messages. My fingers hovered, then dropped. Instead, I watched a couple walk by, hand in hand. They smiled, the man whispering something that made the woman laugh from her gut. Not politely, not prettily, but freely. And I wondered, when did Madison stop laughing like that? I wasn't angry. Not exactly. This was deeper, more exhausted, the way a bone feels after it's been fractured too many times in the same place. There's no swelling, just a quiet understanding that you can't keep bracing forever. I stood and walked toward the water's edge. The river murmured against the rocks like it knew secrets I hadn't told yet. The lights from the banquet hall flickered in its surface, distorted by every ripple. Maybe Janine had a point last week when she said, Madison doesn't need another checkbook, she needs a mirror. But I wasn't interested in confrontation. Not yet. Not with emotions still warm and skin still tender. I needed something she couldn't dismiss with an eye roll or a hashtag. I needed logistics. Pulling out my phone, I scrolled past the bakery, past the photographer, until I landed on the contact I was looking for. Venue manager, Bellthorn Ballroom. I pressed call. A cheery voice answered, Bellthorn, this is Kendra speaking. How can I? This is Elaine Carter, I said, steady and cold. The account holder for the Carter-Langston wedding. I need changes made to the file. There was a pause on the line, a polite flicker of concern. Of course. What kind of changes, ma'am? I stared out at the dark water. Somewhere, faintly, the music in the ballroom changed to something slower, more romantic. I softened my voice. We'll start with a cancellation clause. The dress still hung in the garment bag like a ghost, sealed in plastic and silence. Ivory satin, clean lines, nothing flashy, just how Madison said she wanted it. I'd driven 3 hours with her to get it, paid in full, told her, it's perfect. And at the time, I'd believed that meant we were perfect too. But that dress wasn't the problem. The disrespect was. I sat at the kitchen table, fingers curled around a chipped porcelain mug. The house was still except for the faint creak of the floorboards and the old clock tick-tick-ticking on the wall. I opened the fat wedding binder I kept tucked behind the cookbooks, contracts, receipts, backup vendor info, tabs labeled in my careful script, venue, florist, dress, catering, cake, 7 tabs, 7 years of giving. Ever since Madison lost her father, I made sure I never said no when she dreamed. But the rehearsal night had shown me something. I hadn't raised a dreamer, I'd raised someone who confused kindness with obligation. I flipped to the venue section, scanned the Bellthorn Ballroom agreement. That's when I saw it. Tiny, buried in fine print like a secret waiting to be needed. Clause 14b. Sponsor rights in event of exclusion or defamation. Should the primary financial sponsor be dismissed, excluded from participation, or subjected to public disparagement connected to the event, the venue may cancel the reservation and return funds to the contract holder without penalty. My finger froze over the paragraph. I reread it, then leaned back. My body felt heavy, but my breath was lighter than it had been in days. I remembered Madison's voice in the ballroom, flat, flippant, sharp as a knife. "Don't wear that. You'll ruin the photos." No softening, no wink, just cruelty dressed as critique. I closed the binder and stared out the window. The same hydrangeas I planted the year Madison was born were blooming, pale pink and wild. They never needed applause to bloom. They just needed roots. My phone buzzed on the table. Janine's name lit up. "You okay?" she asked, voice low and gentle. "I saw that photo Madison posted. That dress looked just fine." "It's not about the dress." A pause. "Then what?" "She's been burning this bridge for years," I said quietly. "I just never realized I was the one handing her the matches." Janine didn't speak right away. Then, "Don't light the whole house on fire just to prove you owned it." I looked at the dress again, still wrapped, still waiting. "She burned it first," I said. "I'm just done pretending it's not ashes." After we hung up, I didn't hesitate. I dialed the venue. Kendra, the coordinator, answered on the third ring, chipper and oblivious. "Hi there, Bellthorne Ballroom. Kendra speaking. This is Elaine Carter, account holder for the May 28th reservation." "Yes, of course, Ms. Carter. Everything okay?" "Number, I'm invoking Clause 14B. I'm canceling the reservation under sponsor rights. Immediate effect." I heard a slight intake of breath. Shuffling paper. "Give me 1 second. Okay. Yes, I see it. You're within your rights. Would you like a refund issued to the original card on file?" "Yes." "Okay, we'll process this today. Just confirming. You don't want the reservation transferred to anyone else?" "Number, lock it down. No reassignment." After I hung up, I sat still for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just stared at the binder and thought about how many times I mistook love for sacrifice. Madison's first apartment? I'd co-signed. Her first broken lease? I'd paid the fees. Every crisis I showed up, with a check, with a casserole, with open arms. Now she couldn't even stomach me in a photo frame. I stood, walked to my bedroom and pulled the wedding dress from the closet, laid it gently across the bed. It looked smaller now, like something meant for someone else. That's when the phone buzzed again. The screen read, "Venue refund confirmed. $18,450 returned." I stared at it. Then I whispered aloud, "Happy wedding day." The shriek from Madison's hotel suite could have cracked crystal. "I don't understand. What do you mean it's canceled?" she screamed into the phone, pacing barefoot across a room strewn with silk robes, mimosa glasses, and curling irons. Bridesmaids froze mid-eyeshadow, watching as she fumbled for her iPad and opened the venue's email. Subject line, "Contract terminated. Refund processed." Recipient, Elaine Carter, primary payer. Her knees gave, but her ego didn't. Number. "This is some clerical mistake. Someone call my mom. She'll fix this." But I was already 3 sips into my coffee at Leora's Cafe, the quiet corner spot I'd loved since the 90s. Cinnamon, fresh scones, a low jazz hum, the opposite of chaos. I had my reading glasses on and a printout of the cancellation confirmation in my lap. The ink was still warm. "Everything okay, hun?" Janine slid into the chair across from me, already knowing the answer. "She thinks I'm coming to fix it," I said, folding the paper slowly. "She hasn't figured out I was the one who broke it." Back in the suite, Madison was unraveling. "I cannot believe she did this. 2 days before my wedding? She's jealous. That's what this is." One bridesmaid, Alicia, tried to gently speak. "Maybe you should just call her? Like, talk?" Madison spun on her. "Why? So she can twist the knife again? She loved making this about her." I didn't answer when the first call came, or the second. I let the phone buzz uselessly on the cafe table. Janine took it all in with a raised brow. "Any regrets?" I stirred my coffee. "Only that I waited this long." There was a flash in my memory. Madison, age 6, on a tiny piano bench in a lavender dress, scanning the audience until she found me. She smiled wider when she saw I was front row. I always was. And yet now, 32 years later, she'd told me not to stand beside her on the most photographed day of her life, because my dress, my age, was an inconvenience. This wasn't sabotage, this was self-respect finding its spine. She refunded everything? Madison barked at the hotel concierge now on the phone. No, I can't just book something else, that venue was the whole wedding. The concierge gently explained the truth. Elaine Cart had terminated the contract as legal account holder. The money had been transferred back. The date was no longer available. Madison's world blurred. She tried calling her fiancé, voicemail, again. She's ruining my life, she whispered. I watched the river ripple as I walked downtown after coffee, my heels clicking against cobblestone. I passed a florist. Peonies in the window, Madison's favorite. I didn't stop. By the time I got home, Janine had already posted a photo of our breakfast, captioned, "Some mothers show up even when uninvited." And then the notification came in. A public post. Madison's profile picture beaming in a white robe. I'll never forgive her. She ruined my life. The post had 20 likes in minutes. One comment said, "Wow, your own mother?" Another, "She always seemed controlling." But the one that caught my eye was from someone I didn't know. Sometimes blessings wear heels and carry receipts. I smiled, not because it was petty, but because it was true. The next day, I went to meet with a family friend who runs a historic courthouse. The courthouse smelled like old paper, lemon oil, and stories that had been buried too long. My heels clicked softly on the marble floor as I stepped through the front door, just like I used to when I volunteered here 30 years ago. Back then, I was fresh off widowhood, needing something, anything, to tether me to the world. Filing divorce decrees and adoption forms for the clerks didn't heal me, but it taught me how beginnings and endings often shared the same hallway. James Whitaker greeted me with a warm grin and a silver mustache that curled slightly at the edges. He'd aged like the building, gracefully but with more locks on his doors. "I was wondering when you'd come asking," he said. "Saw your daughter's post online. Brutal." I didn't smile. Brutal doesn't even touch it. We stood in the vacant courtroom, sunlight pouring through the tall windows and catching dust like glitter in the air. The same room where I once sat sorting jury paperwork now held a strange peace. The pews were polished. The judge's bench loomed, steady and timeless. "This place still holds ceremonies," he said gently. "Couples come in for small weddings, 5 people max. Keeps it sacred." "And free?" I asked, half joking. James smirked. "For you?" "Always." I nodded once. "Then this will be her new venue. She doesn't know it yet." Back home, I opened my desk drawer and pulled out the wedding binder, the same one I'd filled with receipts, invoices, dreams I'd apparently paid for but never belonged to. At the back, I found the cancellation clause buried beneath a layer of gold-foiled invitations. Sponsorship may be revoked without refund in the event of breach of decorum, libel, or moral dispute. My lawyer had been wise. I hadn't just paid for this wedding, I'd protected myself from it. I signed the withdrawal letter, hands steady. The financial umbilical cord had been cut. Later that evening, I watched the glow of my phone screen while Madison posted another Instagram story, her bridal slippers in one shot, her makeup artist doing touch-ups in another, a quote layered on top, "Let go of what doesn't serve you, especially people who hold you back." The irony could have lit a candle. But then I saw the comments. "Is this about your mom? I heard she canceled the venue. Oof, so you just wanted her money, not her face in the pictures?" The tide was turning. Slowly. The following morning, a knock sounded at my front door. I opened it to find Jordan, Madison's fiancé, standing awkwardly with a folded suit bag slung over his shoulder. "I can't get through to her," he said, almost pleading. "She's spiraling." I said nothing. He glanced down at his feet. "This isn't how I thought we'd start our life. Is this really all falling apart over a dress?" I tilted my head. It was never about the dress. It was about how she wanted the wedding more than she wanted the marriage. He looked stunned but not surprised. And now we're broke. The florist wants a new deposit. The photographer canceled after her tantrum. I don't know if I can do this. His voice trailed off. Then don't, I said gently. You deserve better beginnings. That night, I typed up an email, anonymous, concise, emotionless. To the valued guests of Madison Carter and Jordan Lane, please note that the wedding ceremony has been relocated. Due to unforeseen changes, it will now take place at the Whitaker County Courthouse. Attendance will be restricted to legal witnesses only. We appreciate your understanding. A friend of the family, I hit send and let the truth carry its own weight. 2 days later, Jordan's mother left a voicemail. Elaine, this is Diane Lane. After reviewing recent events and behavior, we are pulling out of our financial contributions. Jordan has made his choice, and it does not include this wedding. We hope Madison finds clarity. Thank you. I woke up to 27 missed notifications. Not from my bank, or my friends, or my lawyer, but from strangers. Strangers with opinions, with sharp thumbs, and shallow empathy. Madison's latest social media post had gone viral. She was sitting in a sun-drenched corner of her bridal suite, fake lashes quivering with crocodile tears. A slow violin soundtrack played beneath her words. Sometimes the people who are supposed to love you the most are the ones who ruin everything. The caption was worse. She canceled my wedding, my own mother. I have no words. Your toxic parents. Team bride. All I did was ask. The comments flooded in like poison seeping into water. She looks so hurt. Poor girl. What kind of mother would do that? If my mom pulled that, I'd never speak to her again. But not all of them took the bait. Anyone got the receipts? Didn't the mom pay for the wedding? This story doesn't add up. And just like that, the hashtags began to splinter. # Team Bride, Team Mom, Bridezilla Unmasked. I didn't reply. I didn't post. I didn't even flinch. I just watched the chaos from the kitchen window while stirring cream into my coffee. The kind of calm you find after the hurricane's already ripped the roof off. Janine called me, voice giddy with outrage. Honey, you are trending. I never thought I'd say that to someone who still owns a landline. I chuckled. What are they saying? She didn't sugarcoat it. Half think you're a martyr, half think you're mommy dearest in pearls. I let that sit. Let them decide. I've already made my peace. Later that afternoon, my friend Cynthia posted a photo of us at Madison's high school graduation. I stood beside her in the photo, older, rounder, proud. The caption read, "Some mothers build queens. Some queens forget who handed them the crown." The post gathered steam. Women commented with their own stories, about daughters who demanded everything and gave nothing, about boundaries confused for betrayal, about weddings turned battlegrounds. I didn't reply to those either, but I saw them. By dusk, I received a call from the courthouse. James sounded amused. Just confirming again. Madison Carter, Friday afternoon ceremony, small party. So she went through with it? I asked. She tried to cancel this morning, said she had a different venue in mind now, but once I reminded her of your name on the reservation, she backed off. A pause. Is she still marrying him? I asked. James exhaled. We'll find out soon enough. The phone buzzed violently at 8:47 p.m. Madison. I didn't answer. Then came the voicemail, rage painted in sobs. You ruined everything! You think you're some kind of hero? You've humiliated me in front of everyone. You'll regret this. I stared at the screen for a long time after it ended. Not because it hurt, but because it sounded so familiar, like a child tantruming inside a grown woman's voice. A scream I had once hushed, carried, comforted. Now I let it echo into silence. The next morning, I sat at my writing desk, the windows open, Georgia breeze curling around my ankles. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, not to retaliate, not to justify, but to clarify. I opened a blank document and began typing. To friends, family, and those who've reached out. The words came easier than I thought they would. I wrote about the receipts, the support, the years of rent and tuition and bailouts. I wrote about what it meant to raise someone from grief and watch them choose selfishness over grace. I wrote it without venom, just clarity. This wasn't revenge. This was record-keeping. As I proofed the letter one last time, my finger hovered over the post button. But then I paused. A new idea struck. I'd save it. For the rehearsal dinner. Let them hear the truth where she expected applause. I didn't need a microphone or a spotlight. I just needed Wi-Fi and my own damn name. On a humid Thursday morning, while Madison ran final rehearsals and vendors fussed over centerpieces I'd paid for, I sat on my porch swing with a glass of peach iced tea and opened my laptop. The draft had been sitting in my documents folder for 3 days. Its title simple: The Truth About My Daughter's Wedding. I reread it once, twice. My fingers hovered over the touchpad. Then, like flicking off an old light, I hit post. Silence. And then, digital thunder. The first ping came within a minute. Janine texted, "You didn't." Then, "You did." I smiled without teeth. More messages poured in. Old neighbors, friends from my church group, cousins I hadn't heard from in 5 Christmases. Some wrote long paragraphs. Others just sent hearts or the word respect. It spread like fire through dry fields. What Madison had lit with a match, I turned into a controlled burn. The post was simple, clear, devastating. 7 years of financial backing. From rent to groceries to the photographer she just had to fly in from Charleston. $32,840.14, itemized. Down to the glass-blown cake toppers, she said, "Just felt right." I reminded readers I'd raised Madison solo after. Her father died. That I never missed a recital. That I'd co-signed her first car loan when she was 20 and too artistic to work weekends. That I gave not because I had to, but because I believed in her. And how did she thank me? By telling me to change out of my dress because I might ruin her photos. I wrote, she didn't just uninvite me with words, she erased me with contempt. And I ended with, I won't attend the wedding, but I will attend to the truth. And the truth is, I canceled the venue I paid for. Within hours, RSVPs began unraveling like a hem under cheap thread. Guests sent polite regrets. A few sent Elaine direct messages with long apologies, saying they'd believed Madison's version. One bridesmaid sent screenshots of their group chat, how Madison had called me a narcissistic boomer who needed to be humbled. By evening, even Madison's future mother-in-law had reached out. Thank you for your transparency. We're reconsidering our involvement. Meanwhile, Madison was busy digging her own digital grave. She posted a teary video, eyes red, mascara streaked. Her caption, "Mothers are supposed to support your dreams, not destroy them." But her crocodile tears met a sea of rolled eyes. Comments flooded in. Maybe support goes both ways. She bought your dreams. You trashed the receipt. Some mothers build you, others bail you out. Sounds like yours did both. She deleted the video after 2 hours, but the screenshots were already circulating. I could have stayed glued to the chaos. I didn't. I opened a new tab and booked a solo cabin on the Oregon coast. Oceanfront. Quiet. Just me, the tide, and the chance to hear myself think again. When I told Janine, she laughed. That's the most Elaine thing I've ever heard. Not a retreat. A damn resurrection. She was right. For the first time in decades, I was no longer just Madison's mother. I was Elaine again. The morning after my post hit peak virality, I was folding laundry when my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. I hesitated before picking up. "Mrs. Reeves?" a polite voice asked. "Yes?" "This is Deidre from the Savannah Municipal Courthouse. Your daughter Madison Carter is here, and she's requesting to cancel her ceremony." I stopped mid-fold, a towel in my hand. "Did she say why?" "She said the groom hasn't responded to her calls, and she said most of the guests aren't coming." I let the silence stretch. "Would you like us to confirm the cancellation on record?" she asked gently. I stared out the window, past the oak trees and into the pink blush of early evening. "No," I said finally. "Let her confirm it herself." The hotel lobby was supposed to smell like peonies and anticipation. Instead, it reeked of tension, cold coffee, and the sharp tang of public shame. I wasn't there. But Janine was. She told me later that the scene played out like a poorly rehearsed play, two actors finally running out of lines. Madison, arms flailing, voice shrill. Her fiancé, Garrett, red-faced and hollow-eyed, clutching his phone like a shield. "I gave up my job for this wedding," she shouted, heel tapping like a metronome of rage on the marble floor. Garrett didn't shout back. His words were quieter, sharper. "If this is how you treat the person who gave you everything, maybe you don't deserve anything." Guests walked by slowly, pretending not to look. But everyone looked. Everyone heard. At that same moment, I was walking along the riverbank behind my condo. The sky over Savannah was melting into shades of burnt tangerine. A light breeze rustled the magnolia trees. It smelled like summer nostalgia and something else. Release. My phone buzzed. I didn't check it. Instead, I sat on a wooden bench and thought of a different time, when Madison's fingers were small enough to need mine on the piano keys. She was 6. I was teaching her the first bars of Für Elise. She couldn't quite stretch her pinky far enough, so I pressed the note for her. She grinned wide. "We're playing it together, Mama," she said. Even back then, I was holding notes for her. She refused to reach on her own. When I got back to my condo, Janine was waiting inside with a chilled bottle of Riesling and a look that said she was holding more than just gossip. "You're not gonna believe what went down," she said. I waved my hand. Madison and Garrett had their first honest fight in front of 30 people? Her jaw dropped. "You already knew?" But I stopped being surprised the moment she told me I wasn't good enough for her wedding photos. We sat in silence for a few minutes. Then Janine, always the scalpel, not the bandage, said, "Maybe this wasn't the first betrayal. Just the last one you'll accept." The words struck me deeper than I expected. Not because they were cruel, but because they were true. I nodded slowly. I let her borrow my grace so long she thought it was hers. Then I stood up, walked to my desk, and pulled out a folder I'd been avoiding for weeks. Inside, the financial paperwork for the living trust I'd set up in Madison's name after her college graduation. I called my planner. "I want to dissolve the Carter Trust," I said. "You sure, Elaine?" he asked gently. "It's not reversible once we file." "I'm sure," I said, more certain than I'd felt in years. "She's made it clear. My worth expired once my checkbook closed." That night, Savannah was quiet. Even the frogs seemed too tired to croak. I sat in bed, the glow of my bedside lamp painting soft gold on the walls, when the message came through. "Courthouse confirmation, reservation number 4229, canceled at 11:34 p.m. No confetti, no vows, just an echo in an empty chamber." The next day, I went to close out the wedding gift registry I paid for. The storefront window was still filled with lace napkins and champagne flutes when I walked past it, only now they looked less like celebration and more like inventory that no one wanted. Inside the boutique, the air smelled like lemon-scented wood polish and disappointment. A young associate looked up with a practiced smile that faltered when I said, "I need to close out a registry." She hesitated. "Name?" "Madison Carter. I'm the account holder." I pulled out the receipts, each one carefully printed and rubber-banded in chronological order. A trail of generosity that ended with me standing alone under fluorescent lights, canceling a future I'd already paid for. "Is everything okay?" the girl asked, her voice soft, unsure. I smiled, polite but not kind. "It will be, once we're done here." The returns didn't come all at once, but they came. Within hours, my inbox started pinging with notifications. Refund requested, tableware set. Refund requested, honeymoon fund donation. Refund requested, monogrammed towels. I watched names scroll by. Friends, co-workers, distant relatives. Some included notes. "Sorry to hear about the change. Wish we'd known sooner. We were told you weren't involved anymore." That one stopped me. Then the next message arrived, from my friend Deborah. "Elaine, I don't mean to stir anything up, but Madison told us you were just footing the bill. She said, 'Mom wants credit, but she's just the checkbook.'" For a moment, I didn't breathe. I had given my daughter the kind of unconditional, unbreakable backing people pray for, and she'd rewritten it into a transaction. I closed the message, sat back, and let the silence wrap around me like gauze, software suffocating. That evening I poured a small glass of sherry and took out the folder marked Will and Estate. It felt like flipping a page in a very old book. The instructions were precise, logical, unsentimental. I opened a blank envelope and wrote her name carefully, slowly, then drew a line through it. In her place, I wrote, Beneficiary, Coastal Women's Resilience Fund. Secondary, Janine Hargrove. A practical redistribution, not out of anger, but clarity. Madison had treated my legacy like a hand-me-down instead of a birthright. That was her choice. This was mine. Later that night, a voice message arrived. Her name on my screen still made my stomach knot in ways I hated. I played it once. Mom, I don't know how this all spun out. I mean, yeah, maybe I got overwhelmed. But you blindsided me. It was my wedding. You just took everything. Everyone's talking about me like I'm some spoiled brat and it's not fair. I didn't mean, look, just call me, okay? She never said sorry. Not once. Not in tone, not in words. She blamed the wind for where she threw the match. I forwarded the audio straight to my lawyer with a single note, add to file. The next morning, Savannah was washed in soft gray light, the kind that makes everything look like a memory before it's even happened. I stepped outside with a cup of coffee, the mug warm against my palms. The azaleas along my porch had started to bloom again, bright, defiant, as if nothing had ever wilted. Then my phone buzzed with a single message from Janine. He left her. Garrett packed up and checked out of the hotel, one suitcase, no forwarding info. I stood still, not triumphant, not sorry, just still. The ocean wind had a way of reminding you how small your voice really was. I stood near the shore, my coat drawn tight, the sand shifting beneath my heels as if even the earth was ready to move on. My phone buzzed once, then again, then again. I let it ring. By the fifth call, I picked up. Janine's voice came through, breathless. Elaine, you need to hear this. It all came out in one long inhale. The prenup. Apparently, the groom's parents had pushed for it from the start, not because they didn't trust Madison, but because I was funding the entire spectacle. They wanted protection in writing, that if things went south, their son wouldn't be walking away with debts tied to a wedding that wasn't even his idea. I didn't blame them. I might have done the same if I were in their shoes. She refused to sign it, Janine said quietly, threw a fit, said it was insulting. Of course she had. The entitlement wasn't new. It was just now recorded in legal ink. That same day, Garrett called off the wedding. Not postponed, not rescheduled, canceled. According to a friend, he left a note in the hotel room. Just a single line scribbled on a hotel notepad. If you love someone, you don't treat the people who raised them like extras in your movie. He didn't even take the wedding suit with him. I sat in my lawyer's office later that afternoon, the prenup printed on thick white paper across the table. It never got signed, he said, flipping to the last page. But it's telling, isn't it? This refusal. He slid another document toward me. Trust termination authorization. With one stroke, I dissolved the living trust set up in Madison's name. Her future, once cradled in backup plans and automatic deposits, now slipped through her fingers as swiftly as she'd cast aside my presence at that ballroom. I've written the new beneficiary clauses, he said. Janine, and the women's shelter. You can adjust any time, but I recommend notarizing before the weekend. I didn't hesitate. Let's finalize it today. Janine planned a quiet dinner for later that evening, a beachside table at the Driftwood Grill, all soft lights and warm hushes of tide. We toasted with wine, but she didn't say cheers. Instead, she raised her glass and said, to letting go. Of illusions, of guilt, of obligations that weren't ever mutual. We both drank. I tasted salt and steel and relief. The next morning, a voicemail waited. This time, it wasn't Madison's voice, it was her leasing office. Hi, this is Deborah from Harbor Heights Management. We're calling regarding your daughter, Madison Carter. Her lease has been terminated due to non-payment. She listed you as her emergency contact. Please advise. My hand hovered over the delete button. Then, with a flick of my thumb, I hit save instead. Some records were worth keeping. That afternoon, I was folding laundry when the knock came. Firm, unapologetic, familiar. The knock was softer the second time. Hesitant, not out of politeness but exhaustion. I had left the door ajar, the screen creaking gently in the breeze. The sun was falling slow over the marshes, painting my porch in gold and regret. A pot of tea steamed beside me, untouched. I didn't say a word, just nodded at the empty wicker chair across from mine. Madison stood in the doorway, mascara streaked down both cheeks, her mouth tight, as if it had spent too many hours holding in what she was now too tired to defend. She looked thinner, or maybe just smaller. Her eyes scanned the porch like it might bite her. Then, slowly, she sat. The silence between us stretched like a tightrope, fragile, tense, waiting for one of us to fall first. I didn't offer her tea. I didn't ask what happened. I gave her 2 full minutes, not out of strategy, out of mercy, because I wanted to see if she'd use them to tell the truth. She didn't. She cracked. "I didn't mean it like that," she whispered, voice trembling. Her hands twisted around the hem of her sleeve, picking at a loose thread with the desperation of someone who still believed they could pull things back into place. "That day, the dress, the ballroom, I was just stressed. I wasn't thinking. I didn't mean—" "You meant it exactly like that," I said, my voice calm, measured. "And I heard you." The thread snapped in her hand. She froze. Her lip quivered, but I stayed still. "I was scared," she said finally. "Everything was falling apart. I didn't know what to do. You hurt me," I interrupted, gently but firmly. "You hurt me not just with your words, but with what you believed you were entitled to, what you thought I owed you." Tears rolled down her cheeks now, fast and uncontained. "You're my mother," she choked. "Aren't you supposed to show up no matter what?" "No," I said softly. "I'm supposed to raise you to stand on your own. And I did. But you sat down." She looked away, down the steps, out at the gravel driveway where her car probably sat empty and cold. Her jaw tightened again. "I don't have anywhere else to go." It wasn't a question. It was a dare. A test. I stood up slowly and walked inside. She didn't follow. When I returned, I handed her a small folded paper. A hotel reservation, 1 night, paid in advance. "I'm not abandoning you," I said, "but I'm done being the backup generator for your emotional blackouts." She stared at the paper like it was a sentence, or a key, maybe both. Her fingers closed around it. "I want to fix things," she whispered. I looked at her, not the grown woman in tears, but the little girl who once asked if monsters were real. "They can be," I said, "when we let them live in us too long." She stood up slowly, the chair creaking beneath her. I'll go," she said. I didn't nod. I didn't say goodbye. She walked down the steps, pausing once at the bottom like she thought I might change my mind. I didn't. When I stepped back inside, the house was cool and quiet. I went to my desk, opened the safe, pulled out the will I had updated just months ago. Her name was still there, faintly marked beside old inheritances, childhood bonds, the trust I had closed. It was like reading the blueprints of a bridge I'd already burned. I picked up the pen and crossed her out. I sealed the new version in an envelope marked Final, slipped it into the safe, and whispered aloud to the room, "Some things don't need a ceremony. Just closure." The morning after the courthouse called to confirm the cancellation, I boarded a plane bound for Portland. No fanfare, no explanation. I just packed a carry-on, locked my phone in airplane mode, and told the wind to carry the rest. 3 hours later, I was winding down Highway 101 in a rental car that smelled faintly of pine-scented air freshener and stale mints. Coastal Oregon greeted me with fog so thick it looked like the sky had descended to sit beside me. I welcomed it. I wanted to disappear into something. The cabin I rented was modest, bare wood walls, a fireplace that crackled like an old friend, and a porch that overlooked the sea in jagged gray swells. I arrived just before twilight. The air smelled of rain, salt, and wet bark. I unpacked only 2 things, my journal and a sweater my husband once said made me look serene but dangerous. That first night, I sat by the fire and wrote. You mattered, even when they made you feel invisible. Your softness was never weakness. It was misused generosity. Being erased in someone else's story doesn't mean you cease to exist. I wrote to myself, to the woman before motherhood, before sacrifice became routine, before birthdays were traded for catering bills and applause was something only ever directed at the stage, never the seat in the front row. Each morning, I brewed tea that tasted like dirt and strength, bundled up and walked the cliffside path. The wind here didn't whisper. It insisted. It reminded me that things are allowed to fall apart. Erosion doesn't ask permission. It simply reshapes the land until it finds peace. By the third day, I found the bookstore in town, tucked behind a bakery and filled with crooked shelves and lazy cats that didn't care who entered. That's where I met Daniel. He was taller than I expected, wearing a flannel shirt speckled with dried paint and jeans that had known better years. We reached for the same memoir. He nodded. I smiled. He asked if I liked poetry. I told him I'd stopped liking a lot of things, but maybe not forever. He didn't ask about the wedding. I didn't offer it. But when he passed me a paper cup of strong coffee and said, "You look like someone who just laid something heavy down," I nearly cried into the foam. Back at the cabin, I continued writing letters. Not to Madison, not to the version of her I used to raise, to myself, to the version of Elaine who let herself be used as scaffolding, who footed the bills, swallowed the snubs, and told herself love meant enduring disrespect in heels and pearls. I didn't burn the letters. I folded each one into a handmade cedar box I'd bought at a roadside market. The lid squeaked slightly every time I opened it, like it was sighing with me. One rainy afternoon, as I was sketching the outline of a windswept tree in my journal, I heard the mail truck approach. It paused at my cabin, engine humming like a question. A single envelope was placed carefully in the box outside. No return address, just Elaine Carter in handwriting I'd helped teach. Curved, neat, too formal to be spontaneous. I stood staring at it under the drizzle, my sweater clinging to my arms. I took it inside, held it over the wood stove, then stopped. I lit a candle instead, set the envelope on the small table beside me. I brewed tea, reread a few letters from my box, and waited for the ache to tell me what to do. It didn't come. I picked up the envelope, weighing it like a stone. I imagined the contents: a sonogram, a guilt-wrapped olive branch, a demand disguised as grace. I opened the stove door, fed the letter to the flames. It curled like a dying petal, then vanished in a plume of ash and relief. I whispered, "Not all things need to be saved." And for the first time in years, I felt saved myself. Mornings in Oregon were slow and deliberate. Coffee brewed in silence, birdsong rustling through pine trees, brushstrokes gliding across canvas with no one to impress. No calendars, no guest lists, no roles to perform. Just me, the breeze, and the sea beyond the cliff, still crashing like it had something urgent to say. I painted. Not well, but fiercely. Large, messy abstracts that didn't try to be beautiful. They were loud, raw, sometimes ugly. Shards of everything I hadn't said when I should have. Turpentine stung the air, mingling with the rosemary I grew on the windowsill. My hands ached, but my heart didn't. That felt like progress. Janine visited 3 weeks into my self-imposed exile. She stepped into the cabin and immediately let out a low whistle. "Is this a retreat or your villain origin story?" she teased, eyeing the canvases leaned against the walls, the kitchen table littered with loose tea leaves and legal documents. I poured us both a mug of chamomile. "It's my rebirth. Welcome to Elaine's Renaissance." She clinked mugs with me. God, it's about time. We sat on the porch wrapped in throw blankets, listening to the ocean chew the rocks. Janine didn't ask about Madison. She didn't need to. Her silence was a grace Madison had never learned. Meanwhile, online, the whispers started again. Madison's friends, at least the ones who hadn't already vanished when the money dried up, posted cryptic messages. Family means forgiveness. Some people forget who raised the bride. Elders need to heal too. I didn't respond. I didn't repost. I simply watched from a burner account I only kept for legal updates. Instead, I answered their noise with a single action. I funded a scholarship in Robert's name. My late husband had been a school counselor who once said, "If we raised children half as well as we raise excuses, this world would be different." He deserved a legacy better than a broken wedding. The scholarship would go to students raised by grandparents. A small gesture, but a loud one. One rainy afternoon, I visited my lawyer via video call. "All updates are finalized," she said, glancing through the paperwork. "Madison is no longer named on any estate documents, trusts, or power of attorney records." I nodded once. No hesitation. No grief. "Shall I send the confirmation to your Oregon address?" "No need," I said. "I already feel it." Life became a rhythm. I painted in the morning, cooked at noon, took long walks barefoot through the dune grass. I found a dance class in town, mostly retirees with bad knees and excellent rhythm. No one knew my name. I told them to call me Lainey. Reinvention didn't need permission. One night, after a salsa lesson that left me breathless and pink-cheeked, I came home to find a cream-colored envelope slid beneath my door. No stamp, no return address. Inside, a wedding invitation. The cardstock was thick, textured like linen, gold embossed, and her name this time was paired with someone else's. Madison Carter and Eric Holloway, together with their families, request the honor of your presence. My hands didn't shake, not like before. I stared at the invitation under the soft light of my reading lamp, then flipped it over. Nothing written, just a date, just a time, just the weight of a story unfinished, trying to write a new chapter without acknowledging the last. Janine called 30 minutes later. "You get one too?" she asked. I sighed, watching the fog roll in through the open porch door. "Yep." "She's trying to rewrite the ending," Janine said, voice tight. I folded the invitation cleanly in half. "Let her." The envelope sat on my windowsill like it belonged there. Pale ivory with gold trim, expensive ink spelling out my name in cursive that didn't quite match Madison's hand. It was postmarked from Savannah. No note. Just a thick card inside, embossed and heavy with pretense. "Elaine Carter, you are cordially invited to the wedding of Madison Carter and Eric Holloway. No RSVP deadline. No, we hope you'll join us. Just delivery." I didn't cry. I didn't even sigh. I just sat back in my armchair and watched the steam curl off my tea. Jasmine, gentle, unlike the bile that rose in my throat. The only RSVP I owed was to myself. I drafted a note on plain stationery. No calligraphy, no emotion. "Some lessons come in silence. This is mine. Elaine." I didn't send a gift. I didn't post a photo. I didn't text her back. What I did send, without fanfare, was a formal letter to my financial advisor, finalizing the transfer of the original venue deposit. I'd turned it into a small grant through the Savannah Women's Collective, earmarked for first-generation female college students. $18,000. Enough to fund a dream that didn't come wrapped in lace and entitlement. Janine raised her wine glass that night. "To generosity with direction." I tapped mine to hers. "And to silence with teeth." A week later, the town's local gossip thread lit up like a wildfire. Someone posted that Madison's new husband, Eric, had lost his job 3 weeks before the ceremony. Tech, startup, imploded overnight. Another anonymous commenter claimed Madison had rushed the wedding because stability looks better in a tux. I didn't engage, but I watched. The quiet stretched into something peaceful until the bank email landed. Subject: Signature irregularity detected. Dear Ms. Carter, a recent account review flagged a 2023 credit application processed under your name, co-signed electronically. Please verify the following transaction. I froze. My breath went shallow, fingertips cold despite the warm mug between them. I clicked the PDF. There it was. My name, signed in digital ink I never gave. Sathurai. Account tied to a luxury furniture purchase. Delivery address, Madison's old apartment. The timeline? Just after she moved out of my house. Just after I told her no. For a second the room tilted, not from shock, but from rage disguised as disappointment. I forwarded the email to my attorney with a 2-line note. She forged my name. I want to file a report. I didn't scream. I didn't drive to her wedding in some cinematic frenzy to confront her. I didn't even call Janine. Instead, I walked down to the rocky shoreline outside the cabin and let the ocean slap my thoughts into place. How many times had I tried to teach her right from wrong? How many times had she weaponized my love? Somewhere along the way, she learned that silence meant surrender. She learned wrong. I sat down that night and opened a folder labeled, "For When I'm Gone." Inside was a near-final draft of my memoir, part letter, part legacy, each chapter a lesson, each mistake annotated in ink and time. I added a new page. Chapter 21. Forgiveness has a fence. You don't have to let someone burn your porch just because they were born on it. Blood might tie you to someone, but it doesn't excuse arson, of trust, of dignity, of peace. I closed the folder. Then I picked up the phone and dialed the bank's fraud division. I signed the final document without shaking. My fingers didn't tremble. My breath didn't hitch. I'd prepared for this moment, not just with legal forms or notarized names, but in the quiet trenches of my spirit, in the silence after every hurt Madison never apologized for. Elaine Carter, 68 years old, mother, widow, woman of means, and now, woman of boundaries. The will was complete. My signature sat at the bottom, bold and steady. Janine and the Women's Collective of Savannah were now the only ones named. No conditions, no room for guilt-tripped edits. I closed the manila folder and slid it into the drawer marked Final Affairs. I had labeled it that morning. It felt fitting. Outside, the late afternoon tide pulled gently at the Oregon shoreline. Seagulls called above the dunes, and the wind carried that scent of salt, old kelp, and cold air that made me feel more alive than I'd felt in years. My coat flapped at my sides as I stepped off the porch and onto the sand. No audience, no applause, just my feet pressing into the earth like I belonged here. The letter from Madison had arrived the day before, handwritten, unlike her. No envelope, no return address, just a printed invite to a small ceremony in Charleston and one line of cursive ink below. I hope you'll come this time. This time. I hadn't responded. I wouldn't. The last time I showed up for her, she told me I'd ruin the photos. The last time I gave her something, she stole more. And now, she was marrying someone else, someone unemployed, someone rumored to have debt worse than hers. But she wasn't looking for a partner. She was looking for rescue disguised as romance. And I wasn't in the business of rescue anymore. Back inside, I retrieved the invitation and tucked it gently into the fire. It caught instantly, curling like a paper rose. I watched it burn all the way down. No flinching, no second glance. Janine arrived shortly after with pastries and wine. "This your version of a wedding reception?" she teased. "No," I said. "This is what peace looks like." She grinned. "You're glowing. Retirement suits you. Or maybe it's deliverance." We sat on the porch, the sky bleeding peach and crimson over the water. I told her about transferring the last of Madison's venue deposit into the grant program, how it would now help 3 girls through college. She raised her glass and clinked mine softly. "To redirected blessings," she said. Later, alone again, I opened the last letter I'd kept hidden from even myself, the one from my bank confirming that all accounts tied to Madison were now closed. Credit flagged. Fraud report filed. It wasn't revenge, it was protection. And I didn't need her to understand that anymore. I walked the beach just as twilight dropped its veil. A couple argued ahead. Low voices, tense silhouettes. The woman's arms crossed tightly. The man's hands carved the air like he was trying to build logic out of blame. I slowed, then passed them. Once, I would have inserted myself, offered comfort, softened the edges for the sake of keeping the peace. But I'd learned something in these past months. Not all storms are meant to be calmed. Some are meant to be walked away from. And so, I walked. Sand in my shoes, wind in my hair, and for the first time in decades, no one to answer to but myself. Back in the cabin, I opened my leather journal and scribbled a final entry. I wasn't the guest, I was the foundation, and I finally stepped away. I closed it and smiled, heart quiet, soul whole.